Hello and welcome to a brand new Arseblog Arsecast right here on arseblog.com. How are you? Hope you're well. Thank you very much indeed, as always, for being here. Big transfer news to kick off today's show. Nuno Tavares has joined Lazio in a permanent deal after spending last season there on loan. I'm sorry, but it is transfer news. I withdraw the big bit, but it is literally transfer news. It has been a quiet week, and there really hasn't been much going on. Concrete, that's the word of the summer now. You've got to get concrete talks like you're dealing with a construction workers union. Once the concrete is in place, then you can start talking about moving and stuff like that. But look, here's the situation, right? We heard this week that Martin Zubimendi, that deal might not be announced until July because Real Sociedad would prefer it to go through in the next accounting year from a, I presume, income, profit, tax point of view, which makes a lot of sense. And we still don't know which striker they're going to bring in. Will it be Sesko? Will it be Gyökeres? Will it be somebody else? We don't know. What I would say is this. It's the 5th of June at the time of recording. The transfer window is open. Well, the second one will be open. This first one is closing in a few days, and then it'll be open again in another few days. Anyway, the point is that it's open until September the 1st. That's quite some distance away. And if you are expecting Arsenal to get all their business done really soon, like get it all done before June the 10th, you're going to drive yourself absolutely fucking insane. I could be wrong, but I suspect June is going to be quiet when it comes to incomings. Perhaps there will be a surprise. Perhaps there will be a deal announced. I mean, we know Zubimendi is going to happen. That's basically all done and dusted. It's just the technicalities. Whether he signs in June or July doesn't really matter once he signs. That is the main thing. And look, I know there is an anxiety out there for Arsenal to get their business done as early as possible. For me, the key is that Arsenal get the right business done. I'd rather wait a few weeks and get the right player than sign somebody now just for the sake of keeping everybody happy. That's not how you should operate anyway, right? You want to get the deals done because they're the players you want. You don't just pay an extra few million to get it done now because some people are giving out on Twitter. If that was the driving force for any decision making about anything at all, the world would be even more fucked than it already is. So again, just my advice, you don't have to take it, but try and relax a little bit. And I don't think there's any doubt that Arsenal know what they need to do this summer. So at this early stage of the summer, I think we just need to sit back and not get too stressed. Easier said than done, I know. And when you see other clubs doing deals and bringing players in, it's like, oh, they're doing this. Why aren't we doing that? And I do understand that. But on June the 5th, the 5th of June, I am not going to get the flaming pitchforks out just yet. Do I have a fucking shitload of flaming pitchforks on order? Yeah, sure. You'd be mad to pass up a business opportunity like that. But on June the 5th, they're just regular pitchforks. They're over there in the corner. I'm going to go on holidays next week, going to take a week off. And when I come back, I'll assess the pitchfork situation. So there you go. Right. Today's show, we're going to do, because it has been quiet, apart from that big transfer news involving Nuno Tavares, it has been pretty quiet. So I thought we would do our statements style podcast today. And with me to do that, delighted to welcome back from CBS Sports, it is James Benge. Hiya, James.
Hi, Andrew. How you doing?
I'm good, thanks. We're going to do the statements format on this particular episode. So that means our Patreon members have given us some statements, and you have to either strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree with those statements. No fence sitting. You've got to tell us what you really think, Challenge, I know, but we're going to do it. Go on.
I'm not sure many fences could hold me, so it's probably for the best.
All right. Well, look, we've got an interesting couple to start with. Two, they're sort of in the same ballpark. So maybe do them separately, but they're in the same sort of area. So let's start with this one from Robin Butterworth, who says Mikel Arteta will fundamentally shake up our tactics next season. And Bozo Critical T of Church Kivior on our Discord, he says, He says Zubimendi's signing will allow Arteta to radically change the team's tactics.
First of all, Church of Kivior. I know he's played well.
Hey, listen, religions have been started for a lot less, I would say.
And so far he's done very little damage to the world. I mean, to be honest, I feel like I can answer both in much the same way, which is broadly to disagree. I don't think that signing Martin Zubimendi is exciting as it is, and I think this is a really impactful addition for Arsenal. One where some of the excitement was maybe lost due to the news breaking when Arsenal needed a striker. But you're talking about one of the best deep line playmakers in the game. And I don't see why Arsenal would change the way they play for that, because I think that this has been for a while Mikel Arteta's vision of football. And now he's got someone more effective to carry it out. You know, that Zubimendi will be crucial to the way Arsenal play, and maybe the pace will slow down rather than up, which I think is what a lot of Arsenal fans like. There'll be a little bit more control and a little bit less of the up-down play that Partey gives you from six, is my suspicion. It's been obvious for a very long time now that Arteta really craves control, that he's obviously picked that up from Pep Guardiola, probably, I think, from his experiences as an Arsenal player as well. And to me, it looks like Zubimendi is someone that allows Arsenal to get into that position on the edge of the attacking third and not let the ball get out of there. Keep the ball cycling through there, not let it out of there. So I don't think we'll be looking at a very different Arsenal because Martin Zubimendi's in the team.
Do you think maybe it is something that we could look at or should look at or expect? Because, you know, you can't keep doing the same things over and over and over. You do have to change things to some extent. You need a bit of variety. And that was something, you know, I think you're right about Arteta and control. I thought your point there about like maybe some of his experiences as an Arsenal player could have played into that, you know, some scars, you know, from teams that were less controlled, but perhaps a little more focused on what was going on in the attacking third. But, you know, for all that chat about control, it is something he talked about. I remember distinctly when the summer we signed Jurriën Timber, was it Kai Havertz who came in that summer as well? That what he said was he wanted his team to be a lot less predictable. You know, he wanted to have the ability to do different things, either depending on the opposition or maybe what the opposition were thinking about. He hasn't been able to do it, or maybe hasn't been willing to push himself out of his comfort zone in certain ways, because, you know, you're in a situation where you've got injuries and you're going, okay, well, let's just get through this game. I do wonder if it might be something that he is thinking about himself as a way of changing the dynamic for next season.
I would hope so. I think the worry with Arsenal when you sort of look back on their, I would say, the sort of pre-January injury struggles, you know, the games like Fulham and Everton, is that they just it was a little bit predictable, and there was one way that you defend against them. You invite the crosses and you sort of trust that you can beat the one centre forward, and then they don't have a lot else. And yet the sort of simple fact of the matter is, even almost when injuries necessitated invention, Mikel Arteta didn't stray that far from the formula. You know, it was still the 4-3-3 that he's been gravitating towards. It was still low touch left 8, high touch right 8. So if he's not done it when, you know, everything about the situation he was in screamed, try something different, I don't know that necessarily having lots of different options and lots of versatility in defence, which he should have, and hopefully those new forwards as well, I don't know that that's going to encourage him to play differently. There will be variations on a theme. There's always games where, you know, Arsenal sort of look to go long over the press and some where they look to work through it. But fundamentally, I don't think we're going to see different sort of positioning on the pitch, really. Maybe the odd game where you see an overlapping left back, but I don't see that Arsenal are going to play a different way until until it stops being effective.
Sure,
it's effective.
It is, but are you not less inclined to take risks when the options are limited? There is that counter argument to all of that. So, listen, I think we've seen over the time that Mikel Arteta has been at Arsenal, there is a sort of inherent caution in not taking too many risks on the pitch. But, after a season where things haven't gone quite as well domestically, maybe the next step is to take a little bit of a risk. Maybe there's a risk in, what you do in the market. Speaking of which, we have one here from John Francis Elmore. And he says, two players who've been linked with Arsenal, one more heavily than the other. I don't want to go into the whole Sesko or Gyökeres thing again because, what can we say that hasn't already been said? But he says Victor Gyökeres is 1,000,000 times more of a risk than Leroy Sane would be. Sane is also coming off his best contributions for Bayern. I do know they're different positions.
That's fun. Wow. I think I'm going to disagree somewhat. So a slight disagree in terms of the sort of wages that would come with a Leroy Sane move. My sort of understanding is that on Bayern, he's on 200,000 a week. And if you're signing someone on a free transfer, they're understandably going to turn around and say, I've had quite a good season at Bayern. I've had several good years. This is my last big paycheck. By the way, I've got interest from Saudi Arabia because doesn't everyone? I'm going to need quite a lot of money here. So, if I compare that against a sort of Victor Gyökeres transfer fee of 60, 70 million spread over 5 years and a salary that would obviously reflect that, but would probably sit more within Arsenal's existing pay structure. Whereas I would imagine that Leroy Sane, if he came in, would be looking at, what Kai Havertz is earning, what Saka and Saliba and Gabriel would be trending towards earning and saying, that's what you'll need to pay me. And then I think for a 29-year-old winger, that becomes pretty unshiftable if he's not good enough. And I really would worry about giving that sort of money to someone that you're probably looking at as the third guy in your wing rotation. That to me feels like you could end up in a position like Chelsea are in with Raheem Sterling.
Or Arsenal were in with Raheem Sterling. I would strongly disagree with this one. I think there is a risk in taking a player from the Portuguese league and expecting him to come in and do what he does there. I don't think that's realistic in any way. But what I would say is I have probably, and this is just my personal opinion, had enough of the old winger guy who's had some time in the Premier League in the past, who is at the very, very best, he's just beyond his peak. At the very best you can hope for, and potentially it's worse than that. And I feel like having done the Willian thing, having done the Raheem Sterling thing, this feels to me like a lesson that Arsenal should probably learn sooner rather than later. Sane could come in. He's been a brilliant player, there's no question, but he could come in and he could be fine and he could do well and everything else. But it sets all the alarm bells ringing for me. We've done it. It hasn't worked. We can't keep doing it and hope that it's going to work, I did enjoy Raheem Sterling's Instagram message. I don't know if you saw this.
I did not.
So
I've given up on following what Raheem Sterling's up to.
Well, fair enough. I mean, it's not bad or anything. He just posted a picture of him, and I think it's his son who's one of the mascots on the day, and he said, "Thank you for being so kind to my family," something like that. That was the entire message. It felt like there was a lot left unsaid about the season he's just had, and I think it should potentially be a cautionary tale if you are pursuing somebody like Leroy Sane. Raheem Sterling was in a similar position, although he was under contract at Chelsea. Everyone looked at that and thought, well, that's not ideal, but, we're going to get this because he's consistently shown he can do that at Premier League level. The worst we'll get is this. And it was so far below everybody's expectations that I just would run a mile from Leroy Sane at this point.
Yeah, I mean, and the advantage of that Sterling deal relative to what we're talking about with Sane is it's escapable. I mean, I would generally take a sort of, in US sports, they have that concept, don't they? Like the veteran minimum contract, where you pay someone not much money, but you say, come here and you've got a chance to win a trophy. I don't think Sane's at that age, but that is the sort of deal that you don't really see in football that would, I think, work for players in Sane's position. But long-term money for a sort of player with, I was just checking this, sort of 400 career games already, is who's great. Some of his great qualities have been built around pace and
started early, like Sterling.
Yeah, I completely am with you. I think that there's scars there, and I think it would be much more exciting and potentially rewarding for Arteta and the coaching staff to almost get someone that's more of a project and isn't yet ready to overhaul Martinelli or Trossard, but in 3 years' time could be as good as Leroy Sane was 2-3 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, he does play off the right quite a lot as well. So Arsenal interest in Sane, Arsenal interest in Brian Mbomo, maybe suggests that they're looking for somebody for the right wing rather than the left wing. Yeah. But Happy Camper on the Discord says the most important position Arsenal can sign this summer is left wing.
I disagree only in terms of, it doesn't matter to me too much whether it's a left winger or a striker, and we know there's certainly likely to be a striker arriving. But what it is it's just, you need an X factor signing. It's the hardest ones to pick because there isn't the obvious players on the market in either position. We all know if Alexander Isak were available, this would solve all our problems. But he's not, and I don't know of a left winger, a pure left winger that would be available and that could just come in and be a guaranteed uplift. But what I would sort of say is if a player at the level of Vinicius Junior, maybe Rodrigo, who I know has not played much left wing, if they became available, I think the sort of impetus they could add to the team is such that if the cost of that was, you just have to stick with Kai Havertz and maybe sort of settle for a backup to him, I wouldn't be against that. I do think the ideal scenario is strengthening with players that can offer that in both positions. But yeah, I think it's really about assessing the whole forward market, assessing the fit within your team and just going, who's the most transformative, high quality player here? I find that's really hard for Berta and Arteta, given that there isn't an obvious answer in either spot. Fascinated with someone like Rafael Leao, but he's not quite clicked either. So, I see the premise of where they're coming from, but yeah, slightly disagree. Yeah,
it's just so difficult to say this is the guy who will bring us to the next level on the left wing. I like Nico Williams, but you look at the numbers. Are they the numbers of somebody who is ready to blossom and transform and become this end product machine, or are they slightly underwhelming numbers that don't stack up quite as well against some of the incumbents? That is the difficulty. And when you consider the transfer fee, when you consider the wages that would be required for a signing like that, I think he's somebody who is very highly rated, of course, but there's no guarantees. It's the same with the striker thing, isn't it? It's I'm not saying they should flip a coin to decide, because you assume, well, I assume, and I think you do too, and everyone listening would assume that the decision will be made in a much more strategic and thought out way than that. But it is on either side a gamble, a risk, and they are going to have to sort of put their money down and see how these things play out.
I think or people following any one club particularly closely forget that every other club has a very similar experience with their forwards, of they drive them mad every other game. And plenty of teams would swap out their starting left winger for Gabriel Martinelli. I mean, I don't remember watching a left winger in Arsenal colours who hasn't driven me mad on occasion since the big guy, Bobby Pires. And I don't think I ever will, because it's just the nature of wing play that you have to try a lot. And the best wingers have a 50% take on rate. That means 50% of the time they've got the ball in a position to attack a fullback and they've failed, for want of a better term.
Sure.
And that is just that is the nature of all but the one or two best players in the world in their position. And we know that those players aren't available this summer, and Arsenal need to go this summer. They can't wait like they did 12 months ago.
No, I enjoyed the Thierry Henry thing on the overlap where he was saying to Jamie Carragher, Jamie tackled me more than I went past him, which I'm not sure is true. But anyway, strongly disagree. But I think the point he was making was that, for a forward player, it only takes one moment to produce something and to produce something spectacular. It's about your ability as a forward player to do the other thing after you've beaten the man, right? Beating the man isn't necessarily the most difficult part. It's about applying the finish or finding the cross or being aware of who's in the middle to tap home a low cross, So it is going to be interesting. Okay, Jeffo says, given some of David Raya's late season wobbles and height limitations, that's harsh, but I know where he's coming from. He says, it was a mistake not to future-proof the goalkeeping position by signing Joan Garcia at what would be a bargain price for an elite keeper.
Again, disagree. I think David Raya, I have to admit, I missed a lot of the end of the season. But I did see all the other bits of the season, and I thought David Raya was, on our show with Charles, I said he was the best player Arsenal had this season. I think he's a fantastic shot stopper, and he's had some brilliant games this season. The Villa game, the Spurs game, multiple penalties saved. I don't know of another goalkeeper in the Premier League or beyond that I find so impressive coming for crosses. There's room to improve, but I think kind of my view on having watched it back, my view on the end of David Raya's season was this is just a player that had looked a bit drained. He'd made about twice as many saves as he did last season. I think he was tired. I think Arsenal were tired. By all accounts, Joan Garcia is a great goalkeeper, and I think that 20 million deal looked an awful lot more tempting after last season. But, I think at Barcelona there's a more realistic prospect of the first team shirt, given Marc-Andre ter Stegen's injury issues. And I always thought it was going to be quite a hard sell when he got good enough to convince him, hey, in 2 or 3 years, you might be able to you might have a real good shot at taking David Raya's starting jersey off him. I just didn't see that it would work that way. And, if I was advising Joan Garcia, I would say, don't go for the Arsenal job, go for another team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too. Arsenal have a very good number one goalkeeper, so I have to disagree with this one as well. I think I would strongly disagree. I feel like the funds that Arsenal have available to them this summer need to be prioritised in the positions where they're absolutely needed, and that is probably up front and maybe a little bit behind the front positions. I do think there is obviously a conversation to be had about what they do about the number 2 goalkeeper, because your point about David Raya looking drained is right. 55 appearances for David Raya in the season. Take 10 of those off him, and I think you've got a slightly more focused, sharper, less fatigued goalkeeper. Because I think what's interesting about the goalkeeping position is that your fatigue is probably more mental than physical, right? Because you're always on for 90 minutes, and where the way David Raya is asked to play, by the way, really high up the pitch. It's not like he can just stand in his penalty box and just go, oh, the ball's up there, I won't worry about it. He's got to be high up the pitch in case the ball comes back, and he's needed to play in that sweeper role. So for 90 minutes, you're on, and 55 times in one season. He just finished 3rd in the Arsenal Player of the Season vote. I just saw that on Arsenal.com. 2 and 1 still to come, but 3rd for David Raya, which some might say is harsh, but I do think it reflects the good season he's had.
If he's always on, are you advising bring back Aaron Ramsdale to teach him how to take a little mental nap in the game? Far be it for me to question anybody's processes, to each their own, and everyone's individual. I feel like that might have been a slight flaw for Ramsdale. Retrospect.
Just thinking about it, if you need to banter with the crowd to keep yourself focused, Listen, I'm not here to diagnose anybody with anything, but, I think you need to be able to just concentrate for 90 minutes as a professional football player.
I'm really worried he'll go to West Ham because I know they've been linked with him. How on earth will he banter with that crowd? They're miles away. He's going to need a megaphone.
A walkie-talkie. He can just have one in the side of it. Okay, ATX Burke Camp Lover 6969 420 on the Discord. I know. He says, Ricardo...
I love Dennis Bergkamp. I don't love him that much.
He says, Ricardo Calafiori will start 25 games next season.
I realise what I've been disagreeing with a lot. I'm going to gamble here and agree because I think the talent is so high and the versatility that he brings. When we're talking about players that are a bit unpredictable, what I love about Ricardo Calafiori is whenever Arsenal are in possession, he is looking for those spaces where he can receive the ball and he can move it upfield. I think he's a really good left back and a pretty valuable option at centre back as well. But I think he could turn out to be a great left back. So what I'm doing is trusting in his body because if he is fit, even for all that Miles Lewis-Skelly is a fantastic option at left back, I think room will be made for him. And I think the talent with him is so high, stratospheric. Really excited by his technical ability and really fear the worst for his fitness.
Yeah, I also need to be convinced by his ability to stay fit. And I think this is a summer where, he needs to go back to Italy, have a nice holiday, eat the good pasta, come back strong and fit and healthy and ready to go. But I do think what you've said there leads us to a very interesting discussion about Miles Lewis-Skelly. So on the Discord, Shatner's Bassoon says, Miles Lewis-Skelly will not start a single game anywhere other than left back next season.
Oh, just disagree. I mean, it's one of those. It's more one of those ones where I can sort of see two real branching paths for Lewis-Skelly, both of which are just really exciting. I could absolutely envisage him just making the left back jersey his own. Me looking foolish for saying Calafiori will start 25 games and he starts 2 or 5. But I think, given sort of the profile of Arsenal's squad, where they're looking to strengthen. I think when you look at that left 8 position, you'll have Rice, you'll probably have Kai Havertz, but I think there will be opportunities and appropriate games, maybe just in the League Cup, maybe just in the Champions League when Arsenal have guaranteed their top 8 spot or whatever. I think there'll be games where there's value in looking at Lewis-Skelly. I think the same might also be true at the 6 as well. And he's one where from sort of what I'm told, like there's such a belief in his ability to be that versatile player who can fit in right across the squad that I think they will feel compelled to take a look at him in those spots. I would be absolutely fine though if his long-term future is just one of the best left backs in England, because that feels very available to him as well. But yeah, I think we'll see him get his chances to show what he can do in midfield.
I would disagree with that. I think we will see him play somewhere other than left back next season, but I don't necessarily see Mikel Arteta changing too much in the way that he wants his left back to operate. And I think in Lewis-Skelly, he's kind of got this perfect version of what it is that he wants at left back. It's like Zinchenko, but stronger. So, I don't quite know how to describe it. I think that's kind of what he was looking for in Calafiori, the guy who can bring the X factor, such as it is, from that position, where Calafiori, if you give him the ball, he's like, woo, I'm off. He's like a fucking racehorse, and he just wants to...
You specifically made the Mario noise there.
Yeah, I know. But you can see that there's an intent with how he plays or the way that he wants to play, that there is a sort of maverick aspect to his football, which, is at odds with what people think of Mikel Arteta and the way he wants his players to play. But he bought Calafiori knowing what it is that he does. And I think Lewis Skelly does similar things, but in a less flamboyant way, which I suppose is to do with not being, 6'2" with long Italian hair and looking, like a model in Zoolander 3. But I see a lot of Lewis Skelly at left back, but I think the talent and the ability and his quality means that I long term, I do wonder where exactly it is that he's going to play, and I think it'll be somewhere closer to midfield. Okay, Roger on the Discord says Andrea Berta will make us realise that Edu was holding the club back in both the sales and purchasing of players.
Strongly disagree. I think Edu did a really good job. There was no contract crisis. Things drifted a bit more than you'd like, but that's just the nature of negotiating extensions with elite talent when you're trying to get them to sign up for 5+ years and they want flexibility. But the squad was really well assembled. That final summer, clearly, I think there was just a little bit too much turbulence. I think we never talk about it, but I think the impact of Vinay and therefore having my mind is completely blanked, but having sort of everyone in the right role, the guy that moved up to be chief exec, Richard Garlick, having him there as in more of a deal making role. I think there was a really good grouping and synthesis from that quartet, and I think when you take Vinay out and Edu wants the CEO role, but that goes to Richard Garlick, I think people get in their head a bit more, and that seems to me to be the impression of what happened. And obviously also the fact is that maybe there was not the money to spend that Arsenal fans would have liked. But I just look at kind of where Edu was when he arrived at the club, where Arsenal were when they left, with no looming crises in contracts, players that need nailing down. But Arsenal are a better football team. As for the sales part, which is the bit everyone always hammers Edu on, I mean, I will be really impressed if Andrea Berta can clear out what is viewed as Arsenal's deadwood for big money, because there are next to no directors of football at any of the Premier League's top 6 who do that well. I think it's just very hard to convince people to take the £150,000 a week player you don't want and pay you good money for it.
I will say that I disagree with that, but I'm open to the idea that we might sell better. I think as well, it is fair to point out, I agree, last summer people took their eyes off the ball, and I think Arsenal were caught on the hop with Edu's retirement is the word I was going to. Resignation is the right word to use. To go to Forest, leaving the club without a sporting director for the January window, which I think was a disaster, really. I understood why it took time to make the appointment. You've got to go through the processes, but I think between last summer and January, we did not maximise those windows, and that's something the club have to look at in a big way. Nevertheless, we did sell Eddie Nketiah for nearly £30 million or £25 million, which is good business, I think. And Emile Smith-Rowe went, for 35 million, whatever it was. I think there were signs that as the rising tide lifted all boats, it became a little bit easier, let's say, to sell some of the players who we deemed as dispensable. This summer, I think it's a little bit different, isn't it? If you look at players like Zinchenko, who else? Kivior's maybe on that list, where people would say now might be a good time to sell him, that he's got his own church and he's doing well. But after a good showing, which I think has enhanced his reputation, do you sell now and get the money in? Maybe, but then you've also maybe got to think about a replacement defender. We know they were looking at Dean Howson, Calafiori. If you could count 100% on his fitness, you probably don't need to, but I don't think you can do that. So I think it's going to be a very interesting summer, because the hopes around Andrea Berta are very high, aren't they? People are looking at him as like this experienced guy, did all the stuff that he did at Atletico Madrid. But like anyone who's in a job for that long at a club for that length of time, it is a mixed bag. There's been some real success. And there's been some stuff which really did not work out, which you can't put all down to him, because at any club, these decisions are made in a what's the word I'm looking for here? Collegiate, that was the word, but I didn't think it was quite the right word, but a collective decision-making process. Much better. We're helping each other out here. Thanks. Dictionary.com is our friend. So those things are going to be at play at Arsenal, where the decisions won't be just down to him, but as the guy in the front of it, everyone will be saying, well, he did a brilliant job there, or if something doesn't work, not so sure about that.
Yeah, I mean, exactly like you say. And the one thing I would remind Arsenal supporters of is I was at Anfield when they were mobbing Raul Sanllehi. Was that in 2019?
Yes.
Don Raul, the summer of 2019. How did that end up? It is always about, I think with directors of football and recruitment in particular, it's about how well does your organisation function. And one thing actually I would say Edu did quite well, contentious as it was at the start, is he really streamlined that operation to the extent where, targets were clearly established, not always signed as quickly as Mikel Arteta might like, but that is the art of the deal. Mm-hmm. And it worked. And actually one of the reasons that you can have optimism in Andrea Berta's impact is that aside from sort of Jason Ato, a lot of the recruitment staff is there. And hopefully now there's a new established structure with Richard Garlick, with Andrea Berta. The lines of communication look pretty clear. So it should all meld together relatively effectively.
Fingers crossed. Okay, where is this one? Alistair Wood. KSE are prepared to fund the club as much as needed to win the Premier League and the Champions League, and are not just going to put in the minimum required now to keep us in the top 4, top 5.
Ooh. I disagree a little bit. I mean, look, KSE's model hasn't changed. They want this club to be self-sustaining, and I think they understood that to be a self-sustaining club at the level that Arsenal aspired to be, money needed to go in the early 2020s to turn this into a team that could qualify for the Champions League. Now, I think they will sort of expect the team to cut its cloth accordingly. I mean, when you look at, you do have to, I suppose, look at how they deal with other franchises, for want of a better term here.
Are they comparable, though?
It's hard to say. But if you look at, it's hard to say to an extent as well, because a lot of this sort of depends on the individual's view and the individual that's running it. Because we talk about KSE, we're really talking about Josh Kroenke where Arsenal's concerned. It's obviously Stan is involved in these big picture decisions, but it's very apparent that Josh is the real power, kind of much as he is at the Denver Nuggets, and Stan has the NFL team, doesn't he, the Rams. And it sort of is interesting that the Rams, in pursuit of silverware, kind of both of those organizations were willing to push the boat out and go into luxury taxes. That at least is my understanding of it. I don't deeply follow the NFL, and then to an extent, when you get the trophy, the hatches get battened down a bit. You say thank you to some high earners, but we're not going to match this contract offer you've got from elsewhere. Like you say, there's a challenge in, it's not a one-to-one comparison, but it was notable that when Denver won the NBA title, it was great, cheers, thank you, goodbye to all the role players that contributed to this. Arsenal can't do that, but what they probably, I wouldn't expect them to do is, if they won the Premier League title, having spent a decent wedge of money this summer, I wouldn't expect them to do what Liverpool are doing this summer and go out and say, how can we build on this? I think it would be, how can we keep this self-sustaining without chucking money at it? We shall see. We've not really seen Arsenal in this position under KSE ownership, where they're well, other than last season, where they're right on the cusp, and there is a chance to invest and win titles. And I know, because I've had specific pushback from Josh Kroenke on this. They do not like the suggestion of that old Stan Kroenke quote that you wouldn't get in this business to win titles. Yeah, they really they will really tell you that's why we got in this business.
Well, he was there, wasn't he? He was out in Lisbon as the women lifted the Champions League, and if that doesn't give him the the hunger, which I'm sure he already has, to see the men do something similar, then, nothing will. I mean, I think I probably agree with this in a broad sense, in that, like, last summer before, we spent £105 million on one player. That's big spending. That's big money. That's big backing. That is designed to improve your team and to help you win trophies, not just get you into the top four. This summer might be a bigger test of that determination. So we will see. We had quite a few like this because obviously after this season, there has been quite a bit of discussion about the manager. So I'm going to do this one. It was put in the most simple terms by Plastic Tom on the Discord. He says, Arsenal should fire Mikel Arteta next season if he wins nothing.
Strongly disagree, wholeheartedly. Off the evidence I have of Mikel Arteta now, I am more impressed with him as a manager than I was a year ago. And I would have found that hard to believe a year ago. Anyone that sort of is hearing that now and going, Ben, you moron, which I get a lot. Look at what happened to other managers in this position, i.e. sort of battered by injuries, some red cards that were debatable and some that were not debatable because they were stupid. And look at how they got on. Pep Guardiola even had a team scrabbling for the Champions League, and there were big injuries there, but it was really Rodri and Haaland and fading De Bruyne. Jurgen Klopp as well. His team missed the Champions League one year when they lost Virgil van Dijk. And Arsenal really were in that position. There was barely a game went by when they weren't without at least one load-bearing attacking piece. And given that, Mikel Arteta took Arsenal to pretty comfortable second position, kept them in the title race for a fair while, and took Arsenal to the semi-finals of the Champions League. And I agree with what he said. I haven't had a chance to voice this anyway. They were the best team in the competition.
Ooh.
Hey, the metrics all say that. They do. Like, it's what all the XG, all of that says. They were the best team in the competition. They just didn't have that superstar attacking talent because it was all injured. I think this has been a triumph for Mikel Arteta. And while my patience wouldn't be infinite, there's certainly obviously is a scenario where Arsenal don't win a trophy because they finished 7th. But, if he had another season like this one and produced results like this, I would hand him a new contract.
Yeah, it's just such a difficult one to talk about without understanding the context of what might happen next season. We could again get to the semi-finals of the Champions League, and I would disagree with you. I think PSG were the best team in the Champions League this season by virtue of having that special attacking talent that helped them beat Arsenal and helped them win the final in the way that they did. I think the metrics are interesting, and there's certainly something that Arsenal can look at and build on and say, okay, for all of that, where did we fall short and how do we address that? And I think we know what the answer is, and that's, why we're talking about Sesko or Gyökeres or whoever else is going to come in as a striker and help us score more goals. But if Arsenal finish 10th in the Premier League next season and win the League Cup, well, nobody's going to be happy with that. Nobody says, well, it's all about trophies. It's going to say, well, he won a trophy. Give him a new deal.
Exactly.
So it really is all about the context. What I'm looking for this season, or for the new season, is to see Arsenal progress again. I think we've taken a little step backwards in domestic terms. We've improved in Europe. We need to do better in the Cups. And we need to do better again in the Premier League. And I want to see a squad and a manager that is ready to do that. So it really is all about context. Like, if you get 97 points next season and fucking Man City get 98, what are you going to do? Is that a bad season? Clearly not. So, it becomes a little too binary, this discussion for me. By the way, speaking of which, let me ask this one because I do think it's an interesting one. Jeremy Rowe says the Premier League should absolutely continue to take all the time in the world dealing with the Man City charges. And let me put a statement to you of my own. Man City's spending in January and this summer thus far suggests that they're not too concerned about what the result of this investigation is going to be.
I strongly agree with your statement. I suppose you could. The counter argument would be when you have the wealth of Abu Dhabi backing you. If it all goes wrong and you can't lawyer your way out of that, you can simply eat the costs of having Tijani Reinders and Kuzanov and Marmouche and I don't know what you'd do, play them in League Two if that was what happened. You just eat those costs and it's a drop in the ocean. That really is the problem. That is the whole issue with nation states owning football clubs. It's. I cannot believe that there is a risk. Effectively, it is running into next season, isn't it? Because we are seeing Manchester City do things in the transfer window and impact the league through that will trickle into next season. And clearly, I think there's still a possibility we get the first conclusion, because that's what I would expect it to be, before we kick off in 2 months' time. But it's a stain on the Premier League and on English football. That's not me blaming any individual club or the Premier League, but it has been it casts a shadow over a decade of football or more. And I think the real worry as well is that it's been dragging on so long that fewer and fewer people care, and the sort of will to fight this could fade from English football. And when they get the legal bills, they go, oh God, what's the compromise we can agree on? And I do think that's probably part of City's calculus there is, if we keep fighting this, the other side will give in. We've seen sort of the leaks that suggest that would be their approach. It's got to end. But I fear that City have no motivation to make it end.
No, or football in general, or the people who run the game. We're looking at a summer with this ridiculous Club World Cup going on, and they can't sell any of the tickets because public interest is basically zero. There is, I think, a saturation point for everybody with everything that football has gone so far beyond at this point. But it's not just the amount of games; it's the off-field stuff, the ownership issues. Even PSG, as I said, I think we're the best team in the Champions League and a very, very enjoyable team to watch because they're young, they're exciting, they're talented, they play football, really, really nice football, And if this was a team that was cobbled together from the Parisian streets, from the academy and, all these plucky little youngsters coming together to form a local team, you could say this is a brilliant, amazing story. But, in the background of all of it is the ownership issue. And it surprised me, actually, and maybe it shouldn't because we've been around the block long enough at this point. It surprised me a bit how much that was overlooked in most of the discussion about PSG. And part of it is because, or if you're the rights holders of the Champions League, right, you're not going to say, well, PSG have won the Champions League. However, there's a very big asterisk here. Let's discuss that on air for half an hour. Instead, you get the adulation and the lauding of the footballing aspects, but not enough discussion of it. But beyond that, sort of in the wider football world, there were some dissenting voices. Of course there were, but they are so in the minority that you can't help fear that all the stuff about football that makes us uneasy is just slowly we're becoming inured to it in a way because nothing ever happens.
It's completely normalised. When Rio Ferdinand talks about PSG winning the Champions League as a win for football, a triumph for football, you despair. And you are completely right that no one wants 20 minutes of their pre or post game show that they're watching to become a fairly detailed discussion about. So what is the value for Qatar or Saudi Arabia in owning these football teams and spending so much money? And it feels increasingly like there's no sort of space in football that you can go to where you can just enjoy the game at its highest level. I mean, frankly, you can't even enjoy League One football without worrying that what you're really watching is a commercial for the next season of Welcome to Wrexham or whatever Birmingham City's documentary will be. There's sort of no level is there a pure funness to it. Every time you write about transfers, you're sort of writing about the Saudi Arabia sports watching regime, and you think, is it worth referencing Jamal Khashoggi in copy here and things like that? And it begins to spoil the game. I don't know what it means for sort of younger fans, because I think the younger you are, the easier it is to separate yourself from that. But
because it's not different, let's say, from what you knew before. It is the way it is. But I presume at some point in the future, the younger fans now, this might be something that they have to reckon with. Like, where it goes and how it goes to that point, I've got no idea. I just do not doubt the human ability to make something more and more unacceptable the older you get, so kids, for want of a better word nowadays, who are existing or growing up in this world, this is normal. This is how football clubs are owned. Where it will go in the future, I don't know, but I've got no doubt that it will go somewhere where they go, holy fuck, this is very different. This is not good.
I really fear that we'll be sort of talking about the age of the successful local businessman-owned football clubs that were competing for the Premier League, and sort of kids will look at us in much the same way that my grandparents talking about, I remember when these guys, when you used to see them buy the pub once they retired because they'd only earned £1 a week and they were paying 4 games a week and they didn't complain. I worry that we'll be like, David Dean would never have let this fly. And they're like, shut up, old man. We've got the rulers of Bahrain or this Gulf state is funding us, and that's just totally normal now, you absolute weirdo.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, used to play a match, then do a shift down the mines, then he'd go and do his milk round. Anyway, okay, let's do a few fun ones to finish us off here, to lighten the mood a little bit. Rob Roach Skilling says, Bukayo Saka has a 25-plus goal season in him.
Oh, strongly agree, yeah. Easy peasy. I probably would have agreed if he'd said 30.
Okay. I would agree with that too. I think he was on course this season for it, and then the injury played a part. I hope he will do that next season. Gareth Stevens, Eze is the answer.
Oh, disagree. I just worry that the allowances that are made for him at Palace as the primary creator, and also just the nature of being the primary creator at a team like Palace, I don't know that would then flip easily into being the third guy, or maybe even the guy off the bench at Arsenal. But equally, I love that talent so much that if Arsenal would like to find out, I will not complain in the slightest.
That's fair enough. I'm going to agree with that. I think as not the answer, but could be an answer, certainly, for Arsenal. An amazing player. But I don't think he's going to go anywhere for a fee that isn't quite high after what he did this season for Palace and scoring the goal in the FA Cup final. And he's a lot of fun. I really want to see a fun Arsenal again. So, and don't get me wrong, I think the Arsenal from not last season, the season just gone, but the season before and the season before that were fun because we won a lot, and that is the most fun you can have as a football fan. So, I'm happy for our fun to come in the way of 3 points, relentless accumulation of 3 points week after week. Graham White, Arsenal women will win the WSL next season.
Yeah, agree. Why not? Taste for winning. Chelsea are so good. But
couldn't even beat Barcelona.
They couldn't beat Barcelona. Exactly. How can you not take beating the best sort of collection of footballers, like in terms of, I don't know, however you want to view that on the planet in terms of accumulation of talent, how can you not take that and run with it? And I don't watch as much of them as I should, but it's pretty obvious whenever you do that René Slegers is a outstanding coach.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that as well in as much as you can. It's just a prediction, but I do think after winning something like the Champions League, there is there's an ability to recruit players and bring in players who can help you get to another level, but I also think it instills in those players who have won that thing the knowledge and the belief and the confidence that they can go and do it again, whether it's in Europe or whether it's domestically. I think Arsenal aren't that far away, and hopefully with the right additions this summer can go the distance next year. Okay, one final one, more general football related. Northern Gooner says the 3 promoted teams from the Championship this season will not all be relegated.
Agree. Leeds will survive. The other 2 will go down by a long way. I know it disappoints our listeners to hear the prospect of multiple seasons of Leeds, but if they can't survive, then that's that becomes a Premier League needs to sit down and look at how it runs itself and how it can help promoted teams, because that Leeds team is the best to come out of the Championship in several years. Leeds
and Burnley with 100 points in the Championship. What about the idea, this occurred to me because I saw a bit of discussion about this, and it would have obviously been a lot of fun this season given the way that some of the teams finished in the Premier League table.
Ahead of you here.
What about the idea that, let's say, only the bottom team is automatically relegated, and then you have a playoff between the next 4?
Yes.
Would that make the Premier League more fun, more exciting, more interesting?
Completely.
Yeah.
I mean, I know there's a sort of old man waves at clouds thing of it didn't work that way, but I mean, we see the impact that the promotion playoffs have in the Championship and how you get sort of this bonus day of who gets in and then all the excitement that follows. I think to an extent as well, it like the crux of this as well is it's a bit more forgiving to, you know, the Championship teams, even the worst ones to come up from there. They get that extra shot. And look, you know, if it was Manchester United against Ipswich, you would make Manchester United marginal favourites, I suppose. Probably a 55% chance of winning that tie.
This season anyway, yeah.
And good God, I would love to. I'd just love to see the agony across the faces of some managers and some teams as they are battling to survive a relegation playoff. It would be, would you have it at Wembley, or would you sort of have to have it at like inverse Wembley, like 3,000?
Yeah, like at Boreham Wood or something like that. Yeah, exactly. You know, just some crappy little stadium somewhere. That would be amazing. It really would. I mean, some people will say it's fundamentally unfair. Let's say hypothetical, you know, the team in 17th or 18th place in the Premier League has 25 points. And I don't know, some team like Tottenham, right? They finished 17th on 40 points. Some will say it's fundamentally unfair that you can get 15 more points than one team and get relegated, which, you know, is a reasonable argument. But you look at the Championship and we take it as read that the playoffs are going to happen in the Championship, and Sunderland had 14 fewer points than Sheffield United this season, but in the playoff, they beat them and they go up, despite clearly having a much worse season. But that's the peril of the playoffs and also the excitement of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's as long as you're not foisting that on a team midway through the season, they can have absolutely no complaints. And you know, if this were to have happened last season, I'm sure, you know, well, I wonder if maybe Tottenham and Manchester United might have pulled their act together and stopped focusing on the Europa League, much as that delivered plentiful and bountiful amusement for us all. Yeah, you know, I think it's completely fair. You know, that's the way of the league. Yeah, I'd love to see that. I'm just going to see who I can talk to make that happen. Yeah, please put in a good word with somebody. All right, well, look, we better leave it there. It's been a pleasure as always, James. Take it easy and we'll chat soon. Thanks so much for having me. Thank you very much indeed to James Benge. You can find him on Blue Sky. He is at jamesbenge.bsky.social, at jamesbenge.bsky.social, or writing about football and Arsenal over on CBS Sports.
So that is just about that for this week's show. There hasn't been any more big transfer news since we started recording. I did want to maybe just take a moment to mention that one of my favorite podcasters, Mark Maron, has announced this week that he is calling time on his WTF pod, which has been running since 2009, one of the longest running podcasts around. Not quite as long as the Arsecast, which has been going since 2006, but not a bad effort all the same. And I think he is somebody who really did a lot to bring podcasting into the mainstream. And his show has been a real presence in my life for a long time, through good times and bad and all the other times in between. But after 16 years, he's decided that the time is right to call it quits. And that's fair enough. I understand when you're doing a show like that, where you have to, arrange guests and timings and all that kind of stuff. It's quite different from doing a show which is based around football, where a lot of the time you are reacting to either a match or events during the summer or whatever it might be. Trying to get famous people to come to your house or your garage to do an interview is something else entirely. As I know, because I did a similar kind of show for a little while, and it became pretty difficult and frustrating to try and organize interviews with people because, look, their time is precious, and you're asking them to come along and chat to you, and they don't really know who you are. So I get it, but it is a more challenging podcasting environment, although one of my favorite ever podcasting memories was having Mark Maron on the show when he was in Dublin to do a stand-up show, and through John Ronson, who put me in touch with him, and we managed to get it sorted, and it was a good interview. It was a good chat, and I had a nice experience with Mark. So I just wanted to take a moment. I don't know. I just felt like mentioning that. There's still episodes to go. It will be over, he says, at some point in the fall, which of course we call pre-winter here, or autumn. But I just wanted to mention it and say thank you to Mark Maron for all of those episodes down the years, which have been so entertaining and so interesting and so informative. And I look forward to what remains of what has been an amazing and brilliant podcast. Okay, I think that's that for this episode. You can join myself and James on Monday afternoon. We're going to have an Arsecast extra for you, so who knows what will happen over the weekend? Probably not very much. Nevertheless, we will have a podcast for you on Monday, after which I am taking a little break, as I said, taking a week off, recharging the batteries and just getting ready to go again for what's going to be, I think, a busy and interesting summer. And then, of course, the football will start again before you even know it. But in the meantime, have yourselves a great weekend. I know it's only Thursday, but have a great weekend, and we will catch you on the next one. Until then, cheers. Bye-bye. Have we signed anyone yet? No. How about now? Nope. What about now? Still no. Have we signed anyone now? No. Have we signed anyone? No. Have we signed anyone? Also no. Have we signed anyone? No. What about now? Let me check. No. And now? Oh, did we make a signing? Oh. No. How long do you think we can keep this up? all fucking summer.